Everyone, and welcome back to another GT Sport livery time-lapse video. In this instance we're looking at a BMW Hypercar livery concept. Now we're using the McLaren Vision GT for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's probably the most out there hypercar looking vehicle in the game. Closest probably to the Valkyrie. It's that sort of architecture of the scooped out inners, very F1 based with wheel covers, etc. And also the link between BMW and McLaren in Le Mans history. Of course, BMW powering the McLaren F1 cars to their Le Mans success in '97. So starting off with the livery, we're looking at an asymmetric design, all in matte, looking at BMW's latest identity, taking inspiration from their Formula E car, the M4 GT3 camo livery that's just come out. And part of this big shift we're seeing in BMW M liveries is the gradient effect. It seems to be overtaking the traditional flat stripes, so that's something I wanted to implement here and really fit around the curvature of this car and create my own silhouette. It's something I've talked about in previous videos, is making this silhouette of the car and creating your own shapes and defining your own surfaces to build these graphics around, and that's something I'm really looking to push forward here. So we're seeing on the first side, we're applying this gradient and then looking at these surfaces and around them, experimenting as well with this line effect, something I used on one of my F1 livery concepts a while ago, but just didn't feel it worked here and didn't really fit the design as well as I wanted. And then approaching this further, I looked at creating a more geometric effect to really boost at the black. I didn't feel like the white sort of leaked over too much there, but again, it was another experiment that didn't quite work, and that's the thing with this. There's an awful lot of trial and error, an awful lot of designing on the job in GT Sport. It's mostly fun, but it's also good practice for putting yourself under pressure in these situations. So again, just looking back here, it's something that you've seen in a few of my other liveries for BMW concepts, is this geometric architecture of the black or the high carbon line to create these surfaces, especially contrasting against the hard and soft elements seen on the car. So that's something I wanted to push forward here. A lot of the time spent on the McLaren concept is tidying up these surfaces with projection levels. It's quite hard on GT Sport to get this one because there's so many surface aspects and sort of leakage of the decals, because it's all projected by camera that I do most of my GT Sport work with just to get these elements in. So a lot of it's just tidying up, refining it, seeing what's working, what isn't working around the surfaces, especially around that back area. Using this cut across the roof, basically just to continue this line going up from the bonnet all the way across the top surface of the chassis. And then we're looking at adding in the sponsors to really complete the look. We've got the base livery done, and I wanted to, as I always talk about, emphasise this and bake it in reality as much as I can. So a lot of the time looking at current BMW sponsors, applying those to this, giving them real world proportions. Panasonic's quite a tempting livery to put in because of their links with Toyota and huge title sponsorships with Jaguar and Formula E, but BMW don't have that. So, and I see a few concepts that use that to the fullest, but I wanted, again, it's a fantasy livery, but I want to bake it in reality as much as I can. So weighting those sponsor areas in reality, and then adding series sponsors. So the Hypercar decals, we're not too sure what they're going to be, so I'm going with the HY and the P1 that we currently see. It seems to work for that. So adding those in, German flags, race numbers as well is the biggest detail, and getting the bounding boxes correct. You see a lot of Le Mans concepts that just plonk the numbers in red boxes, but it's good to especially use GT Sport's decal search engine, because people have made them, is to use the official bounding boxes to have those. Again, it's just putting it that little bit more in reality and keeping those elements consistent. Part of the toughest bit with the asymmetrical livery is, of course, duplicating and flipping those logos and then reversing the colours to make sure they work on all elements. And then it's where you find, if your logo is overlapping on the one side, will it overlap into a separate colour area on the opposite? So that's something that you really want to start looking at and playing around with, just to make sure everything balances from side to side. You don't want logos leaking over colours is something that I've experienced in the real world quite a lot, and especially in Formula 1, is you do not want these colour surfaces to be leaking over into any area of any overlap. And then just moving through the design, it's just tweaking these fine details, trying not to overcrowd the entire car. It's something that I've been guilty of in the past and something I always try and avoid. And that is not just overcramming every single surface. Sometimes simplicity is key. I know it's an overused catchphrase, but we see it especially in real world liveries, and the best example for this is probably the Mercedes F1. You look at their nose stack compared to a few other teams and there's 3-4 logos, and that gives them the priority, that gives them the cleanliness and the important TV on the grid front on shot. So there we go, that's the completed design. I hope you've enjoyed watching that along with me, and then just going into some final render shots, showcasing the design, putting it in environment, seeing how the lights reflect on the matte surfaces, and that completes the sort of the trinity of designs that I've worked on GT Sport. You can find them all in the links, with the 90s, 2000s and now the 2020s versions of the BMW ones. So thank you for joining me with that, and subscribe, like and comment what you want to see next.